Legal with Mike Davis of Article 3. Let's get into it. Mike Davis, always glad to have you on the show, especially in a week where there's so much legal stuff. And since I have my entire legal background based on watching Law and Order, I need someone of your expertise and caliber to guide us. So thank you for being here once again.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. All right. I want to start with this Hunter Biden thing last night. He after the big stunt, and I'm going to get to that in a second. So just hang tight, because I thought that's how we're going to start today. I wanted to ask you about your legal insight into that. But let's start with the now more relevant news, which is he flies from D.C. back out to California, pleads not guilty to 9 tax felony. It says Joe Biden's son Hunter entered not guilty plea to 9 felony and misdemeanor tax charges at his initial appearance, accusing him of failing to pay $1.4 million in taxes from 2016 to 2019. Okay. So here's what I want to get your take on. He had initially already agreed to a deal, and I get it. Nothing's binding until it's binding or whatever. But so that there's that. And then the second is either you paid the taxes or you didn't, right? That's really not something to dispute. And we know now that he has paid back, that he has paid the taxes subsequently. So these charges are to failure to have paid him in the first place or whatever. From a legal standpoint, how do you plead not guilty to something that you've basically de facto admitted that you did?
Well, politically, he's going to have a lot of problems with how you're describing this, and that's exactly right. I think as a matter of law, when you're going through plea negotiations, those negotiations are privileged and they don't get admitted into court generally. And so the plea deal fell apart, so the prosecutor can't use those plea negotiations against him in court.
Okay,
that's
and that's fine. I get that part, right? Even as a non-lawyer, I get it. It's like, hey, we were negotiating and it fell apart. But at the end of the day, he did subsequently pay the taxes. That is an admission that you hadn't paid him in the first place, right? So that's what I'm kind of getting at. How do you subsequently say, I'm not guilty of something that I'm paying the fine for?
Well, there's a difference between criminal tax evasion and civil tax evasion. Civil tax evasion is you just didn't pay your taxes. You have a civil proceeding brought against you and you have to pay your taxes. It doesn't matter your criminal intent. With criminal tax evasion, you have to show that there was a criminal intent, right? You have to show that he knew he wasn't paying his taxes, he was evading his taxes.
Okay, so he basically has to say, I knew that I didn't think it was that it was against the law to funnel this money away from my kids' education account to pay for prostitutes. I didn't think that was against the law to write it off on my taxes. I thought you could write that off, and I didn't know it was against the law to write off a prostitute. Like, my bad, right?
Yeah, hookers and blow are apparently not deductible.
Dude, this is why I really appreciate you coming on. I mean, I know you went to law school so that you can inform us that you cannot. And we're a few months away from tax day, but just so everyone is aware, Mike Davis has made it clear you can't write off hookers and blow. No. Okay, I'm glad we cleared this up, because I just, as I was getting ready to get my write-offs ready, I wanted to know, as long as I don't believe it's a crime, though, I guess is what you're really saying. Then I'd just be civil. It couldn't come after me.
You can't just bury your head in the sand and say, I'm just stupid and I don't understand tax laws. But, you can show a criminal intent in many different ways, including what Hunter Biden did, which is pretty obvious to an average person that, no, you can't take tens of millions of dollars in corrupt foreign payments and not report them and then use that money and deduct hookers.
All right, folks, if you've been part of the show for a long time, you know about my friend Leo Grillo from Delta Rescue. If you go to deltarescue.org, you can see the great work that they do as the world's largest no-kill sanctuary. That's right, no-kill sanctuary, not a shelter, a sanctuary for all sorts of abandoned cats, dogs, and other animals. Leo Grillo has made it his life mission to do that. And the thing about Leo is that this was a mission that he started a long time ago when he rescued a Doberman named the Doberman Delta. Delta stands for dedication and everlasting love to animals. And that's exactly what they've done at Delta Rescue. If you go to deltarescue.org, you can see all the videos of the great work that they're doing. But more importantly, they rely entirely on contributions like me and you. right? So when we give them $5 or $100 or whatever, that's how they support. But Leo wants to make this an enduring mission. If you go to deltarescue.org, you can download their estate planning guide and help make Delta Rescue a part of your enduring mission as well. Go to deltarescue.org, click on that estate planning guide and see if you can join others in making Delta Rescue an enduring mission for years to come. You know what's funny to me though, and I know this is like going down a rabbit hole, but it's like I'll always send stuff to my accountant, right? And I'll be like, hey, I took Mike Davis to lunch. We talked about that. Can I write that off, right? And he'll be like, yeah, as long as you talked about the show or, some project that you're working. I mean, like, I'll bounce stuff off of him to ask, how can I, is this a deductible expense or whatever? And I write a list and I'm just thinking to myself, like, forget the law for a second. Like, did he send something to his accountant where he was just like, hooker? And I mean, because at some point I actually think about the accountant in this case and I'm like, yeah. I mean, did you talk business with her? Did you get her take on like, on Burmisma and energy issues in Ukraine? Because if so, then we've got some latitude here. But I actually do wonder about the accountant. Like, who allowed that as a deduction?
Well, I mean, maybe if the hooker, maybe it was a business expense, business development, because he's going to paint pictures
business
of the
development.
Hooker. Yeah, I mean, he's an artist, remember? So maybe he's going to, he's going to use finger paints and paint nude photos of his hookers, and he's going to try. Or
he just needed inspiration.
Biggest donors.
He needed to relax a little to get inspiration for his next painting. All right, well, that's our moment of levity. Let's go back to this stunt that he pulled at the House Oversight Committee, right? You and I spoke the last time that he pulled a stunt, which was showing up on Capitol Hill to do that press conference to be like, hey, I'm here. And then he walked away. This time he shows up at the hearing room.
But I'll make a motion. Let's vote. Let's take a vote. Who wants to hear from Hunter right now, today? Anyone? Come on. Who wants to hear from Hunter?
The thing that's interesting, and I talked about this on yesterday's show with the panel. I think here's how this is what I've been trying to explain to people. I've done several depositions now, right? Mueller and others. And the reason that you do a deposition is it's with lawyers and they think about methodically, strategically, chronologically, how they want to go about getting to the bottom of an issue. So they'll bring you back to somewhere and then kind of move along methodically. And as someone who's being questioned, I have attorneys that were preparing me for this. And so when people say, why didn't the Republicans just allow him to testify? My answer's been because they're not lawyers. The staff lawyers are want to depose him because that's their job. Members of Congress get 5 minutes and they want to ask maybe a politically charged question, as we saw Nancy Mace and Marjorie Taylor Greene. They're not there to have the legal background and prowess to properly question a subject. Is that sort of why? I mean, is that what you would want people to get away with or to understand about the process? Or is there more?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not the target of a subpoena. It's not their decision whether it's a deposition.
No, and I get that. Right. You can't. Hunter Biden, when he went to court last night, didn't get to walk in. Let me just see the judge's name. Let's see if they have it here.
Scarcy.
Judge Mark
Scarcy.
Scarcy. Okay. So Hunter didn't get to walk into court and say, hey, judge, here's how I want today's proceedings to go. Like that's insane. And yet the House of Representatives has subpoena power, deposition authority, and he doesn't get to walk in there either. And just as he couldn't walk into a courtroom and demand things, I know Nancy Mace was going off about white privilege. It has nothing to do with white privilege. It has to do with the rule of law. You don't get to choose the venue in which you get to conduct yourself. It's not how it works. But my point more broadly, because I was talking to some people when this blew up, when Hunter walked in, and Republicans, people who are with us, and said, hey, why didn't the committee just say, fine, let's go? And my answer was twofold. One is because they're not attorneys. Each of them gets 5 minutes. They weren't going to be ready to have a legal, I don't know what you want to call it, investigation into this, nor were they prepared. And that's not how depositions work. And then, so I get your point. He doesn't get to choose. But more importantly, That's not how you don't get to go talk to the bailiff when you go to court and say, I'm just going to talk to the bailiff, right? That's not their role. That's not their job. The judge presides, right? You don't get to go, I'm only going to talk to the bailiff and the court reporter, right? In the same way, Hunter doesn't get to choose who he does a deposition with.
That's exactly right. We have to step back, Sean, and look at what they're investigating here in the House of Representatives. They're not investigating Hunter Biden's hookers and below, as we joke about. They are investigating whether the sitting president of the United States is compromised by tens of millions of dollars in foreign bribes and other corruption to what seems like every Biden family member, except for the 6-year-old granddaughter, who they finally acknowledged after 6 years. These payments have come from China, from Russia, from Ukraine, from Kazakhstan, and Hunter Biden is the bagman for the Biden family. That's why they're trying to depose Hunter Biden, and they need to dig in to these transactions and get him on the record. Heck, if there's an innocent explanation for this what appears to be foreign bribes and corruption, this deposition would be good for Hunter because he can clear his name. He can clear his family name. He knows that they're going to be able to dig in, as you say, Sean, that real lawyers are going to be able to dig in this deposition. And that's why Hunter is running scared. That's why he's putting on this public charade.
So let me ask you this. You worked on the Hill, obviously on the Senate side where you held, you led the nominations team. But let's just pretend for a second that Chairman Comer of the House Oversight Committee and says, Mike, either come back and help me out or I just need your counsel, whatever. And he says, look, you saw what happened the other day. We're having another hearing. We hear that Hunter might show up again and pull another stunt. Politically speaking, forget the legal and everything else. As a staffer, as an advisor, strategically, what should we do this time? Should we call his bluff and just say, and I, as chairman of this committee, I'll have my members ready. Like I'm going to give every one of them a question. And say, fine, Hunter, sit there. And I'm going to make sure that Nancy Mason, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and everyone else on the committee asks a key question that we want. And we'll work with the lawyers, Mike, and we'll get this on. What would you advise him to do if this happened again?
I would advise seeking a resolution from the House to have the House Sergeant at Arms arrest him, because you don't get to play these games that Hunter Biden is playing. And we know the Biden Justice Department is not going to do a damn thing about Hunter's obvious contempt of Congress. And there's also Hunter's lawyers are participating in this. Joe Biden may be participating in this conspiracy to thumb their nose at a legitimate congressional investigation to figure out whether the president of the United States is compromised by these tens of millions of dollars in foreign bribes and other payments. The Biden Justice Department, Fannie Willis, Alvin Bragg, they had no problem arresting President Trump for non-crimes. And so there shouldn't be a problem with the House Sergeant at Arms working with Hunter Biden's Secret Service detail to bring him in and book him and charge him for contempt of the House of Representatives, contempt of Congress.
I think that's a fact. See, this is why you're so good at because I didn't even think about that, but you're right. And is that, is that to your knowledge, if that Sergeant at Arms was instructed by the House through a resolution to do it, they don't have a choice, right? They say we're the chief law enforcement officer of the House. We will do this.
That's exactly right. There's actually a prison, a jail cell inside the Congress where you put witnesses who are in contempt, and you can.
And has that ever happened? Has that ever happened?
Yeah, it's happened. Now, Congress has passed a statute. I think it was. I'd have to go look. It was back, I think, in the 1970s, where the Justice Department has the power to bring federal contempt charges. But yes, the House of Representatives has inherent power to arrest people for contempt of Congress. And put
do you know, has that jail ever been
Capitol.
used in modern day?
I don't think it's been used in modern day, but you know what? We haven't had a situation where the president's son is the bagman for the president of the United States. He's covering up for his father and his family, and the Biden Justice Department is not doing a damn thing about it, while the Biden Justice Department went and arrested and tried and convicted and is trying to jail top presidential advisors like Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro for contempt of Congress for objecting to subpoenas under executive privilege, not under the hookers and blow privilege that Hunter Biden's trying to assert.
All right, folks, think about this for a second. Do you think that Wall Street is lying to us when it comes to our investment and retirement opportunities? We know about the 401k. We know about IRAs, but there are other options available to us that offer a lot more stability, allow us to ride those ups and downs in the market, to know that we're protected. If you go to bankonyourself.com/Spicer, you'll get to see what I'm talking about. You will get a free guide that will give you these options. Did you know, for example, that the father of the IRA is actually saying that it's a failed experiment and that it should be destroyed? That's interesting, isn't it? You can have tax-free retirement that you'll know what your tax rate will be in the future. You will be in control. You could take out money at any time and not without penalty, which you can't with an IRA or a 401k. You'd have built-in inflation protection. Your money is guaranteed to grow by a larger dollar amount every single year, both in terms of the good years and in the bad years. So if you want guaranteed, predictable annual growth in your retirement account, then go to bankonyourself.com/Spicer and you will get a free report with proven retirement alternatives that banks and Wall Street don't want you to know and that they desperately hope that you never hear about. So go to bankonyourself.com/Spicer for your free report. That's bankonyourself.com/Spicer. I do think that there is some creative out of the box thinking that is needed up there. And I think they would benefit from that. Cause to me, that actually is so if he knows, hey, dude, you're going to it's sort of like someone who has an arrest warrant out for maybe a fender bender or a speeding ticket or something. And they know that if they get caught driving in X jurisdiction, they're going to get brought in, right? It's just, that's how it works. It may not be the most serious offense, but I think if Hunter knew that, hey, dude, you're going to get brought, you pull this again, we're bringing you in. But let me put a pin in. There's so much more legal to get to, but just to ask you this, Abby Lowell, and I brought this up with the panel the other day, is considered in DC a very serious attorney, right? He's the kind of guy that you call if you're an establishment type that gets into trouble. Jared Kushner had him represent him in the last administration, and the list goes on and on. I'm surprised. Having me, who has just been a witness in depositions, right? It's through a number of the Trump things, including Mueller. I've had attorneys, and they're always very clear about what I can say publicly, what I should say in the media. Not because I'm a target, but they want everything buttoned up, right? And I can't imagine. I'm actually shocked that Abby Lowell is going along with the first stunt you and I talked about. I was a little shocked on that one. You brought up that he could potentially be charged. But this one I thought was a little over the top and a little risky. Are you as shocked as I am that a guy like him who's so buttoned up and in white shoe that he's pulling this off?
Well, I would say to Abby Lowell, any attorney who is advising a client that they can commit contempt of Congress, they're aiding and abetting that contempt, or they're conspiring to commit that contempt, you're setting yourself up for legal jeopardy. You're setting yourself up for criminal liability in the Trump 47 Justice Department. You're also setting yourself up for contempt proceedings before Congress, and maybe the House Sergeant at Arms can go pick them both up at the same time. But you're also facing an ethics complaint with your bar. Now, we know that in D.C., that the Biden Justice Department is not going to do a damn thing about this, and the D.C. bar is not going to do a damn thing about this. But, maybe the Trump 47 Justice Department might do something about this.
Yeah. So I want to pivot now because, as I said, we've got a lot of legal stuff. Trump was up in New York yesterday. It's interesting to me on that. That's a civil case. And then he was in New York. He was in D.C. at the beginning of the week for the case down here. In both of those cases, he doesn't need to be there. Considering the fact that he's running for president and the Iowa caucuses are Saturday, Sunday, Monday, 3 days out. So let's call this, he was his fourth day and his seventh day or whatever before the caucuses between New York and D.C. As a lawyer, forget the politics of this. Is it a good use of his time to sit there?
I think it's a good use of his time if he wants to sit there because, as you know, he's facing the rest of his life in prison for non-crimes, and he's facing.
Yeah, but in New York, it's civil, right? So I get it. It's his company.
But he sat through the D.C. Circuit case as well.
Right.
So he sat through the D.C. Circuit case on presidential immunity, on Jack Smith's case that would put President Trump in prison for the rest of his life for the non-crime of objecting to a presidential election, which is allowed by the Electoral Count Act of 1887, and twisting arms politically is allowed by the First Amendment. In New York, he's facing his business that he's built over the last 50 years being wiped out and losing his ability to run his business in New York, and facing, $350 million in a punitive fine from this whack job New York judge, Arthur Engoron, who decreed before the trial even started somehow that Trump committed fraud before the trial even began, before any witnesses or any other evidence. No jury, just Judge Engoron, this biased goofball judge, just saying, yeah, I think Trump committed fraud. I'll just decide that now, and then we'll have the trial.
And that's what I find. I literally, as I said, my entire legal experience is drawn from the various law and orders, criminal intent, special victims unit. But I watch this, and when you say it, right, it's the guy has been found before this started. This whole thing in New York that we're all watching is just basically a negotiation over damages and whether he'll lose his business license. They've already found him guilty of fraud. This one really blows my mind. Because the judge ruled against him before it even started. That's number one. Number two, there's no victim. There's no victim in this. I mean, literally and also, I guess it was one of the banks that came out and said, yeah, we went through, we did our due diligence. We assessed that the properties that he was looking to refinance or whatever were in accord with what we thought was meaning that they didn't find this out of whack. They're the ones who had something to lose. He paid everything back. They're fine with it. I literally, that case in alone, I get it's the civil one, but I look at this and say, how does one look at this and say that is not a weaponization of the law by Letitia James, who, by the way, let's be honest, said, and I'll play the clip for the audience, I will get Trump when she was running for office. It's literally right there for everyone to see.
I will never be afraid to challenge this illegitimate president. He should be charged with obstructing justice. I believe that the president of these United States can be indicted for criminal offenses. I will be shining a bright light into every dark corner of his real estate dealings. And every dealing, demanding truthfulness at every turn.
Big Tish needs to face she needs to face a bar complaint herself. And frankly, we should look at criminal charges against her in the Trump 47 Justice Department. She's clearly conspiring to violate Trump's civil rights, which is a federal crime, right? You can't go after someone because you disagree with them on their politics. And she, like you said, Sean, she campaigned on the fact that she's going to get Trump. She brought these bogus charges against President Trump. President Trump paid back sophisticated Wall Street banks on time, in full, as agreed, with interest. There's no victim here, right? Yeah. As you said, the banks are very happy. And one of the things that Big Tish, keeps going after Trump on is Trump says that Mar-a-Lago is worth like $700 million. And Big Tish thinks that Mar-a-Lago is worth $18 to $25 million because that's what the tax assessor down in Palm Beach says it's worth. Well, what the tax assessor says it's worth is not what it's worth. That's right. Because there's a limit on how much you can tax down there. A tennis court in Mar-a-Lago is worth more than $25 million. This is the most expensive real estate in the world. And Trump has 20 acres of the most pristine real estate in the world, bordering both the intracoastal waterway and the Atlantic Ocean. There's no other property in the world as unique as Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah. I mean, I was just down there. You got a little tunnel that takes you over from the intercoastal side to the Atlantic. It's beautiful. Tennis courts, as you said, a spa, rooms that are unbelievably ornate. To me, I would think that she could be equally prosecuted for devaluing in a court of law his holdings. I mean, if you're going to say that he inflated it, then you deflated it.
Well, I mean, and that's just it. I mean, these Democrats say that President Trump doesn't have presidential immunity, and
Well,
so
let me get. I want to get to that in a minute because that's my next question for you. But just on the Mar-a-Lago thing, let me just play this out, and then I want to get to the immunity. Let's just for a second. We all know that judge hates Trump, and Letitia James, Big Tish, as you call her, she doesn't like Trump. So they're going to rule against him. They've already have, as we pointed out. It's just a question of how much. Where does it go from there? How does he? I mean, because let's just assume. Let's just call it 250. They say $250 million and they pull his business license. What happens then and how does it play out from there?
Well, I think this Judge Arthur Engoron, who's proved himself to be a total partisan clown, will try to immediately do it, and Trump will appeal through the New York appellate system. You've already seen from the New York appellate courts that are all Democrats that they even think that what Big Tish and Engoron are doing is just too much. They've already slapped down Engoron on a receivership. And so
didn't they slap him down on the statute of limitations too, saying you can't, like, this is old news, bro.
Yeah, they did. I mean, when you have a Democrat dominated judiciary in New York saying that this is too much, then that just shows you how crazy Big Tish and Arthur Engoron are. This is insane what they're doing. There's not fraud here. This is clearly lawfare. This is clearly election interference, and it's part of the Democrats' pattern, as we've talked about many times, with the 2 bogus impeachments, the 4 bogus indictments for non-crimes. Now they're trying to bankrupt him for non-fraud. That's all backfiring. The 2 illegal and unconstitutional gag orders. Now they're just trying to take him off the ballot, right? This is insane what the Democrats are doing. And as we've talked about for many months, Sean, this is backfiring. They're turning Trump into Nelson Mandela. It's going to put him back in the White House.
As part of the New Year resolutions, did you decide you want a little financial security, diversify your options? Well, I've got an idea for you. Go visit my friends at Bishop Gold Group. They are who I depend on when I wanted to diversify my account into precious metals. I called them up. I had a conversation about where I was in terms of my investment portfolio, where I was in terms of retirement. And we created a plan that involved precious metals, a mix of gold and silver. The best part about it is you can sit down and figure out what works for you. If you want to roll over an IRA, if you've got particular savings, if you want to hold it, if you want them to hold it, all of those things they can answer on the phone for you. And in these days of economic insecurity, this is the way to go. Diversify your account. Think about how you can add precious metals to that portfolio that you have, how you roll over that IRA or anything else. Give them a call right now, 844-984-1616, bishopgoldgroup.com/Sean, bishopgoldgroup.com/Sean for a special promotional offer. The thing that I always tell people is, these lawyers aren't cheap. And, you're kindred spirits there. I mean, they cost a lot of money, and it's not just one lawyer. Like when I was going through Mueller, I had a lawyer, and then they had a partner, and then we had a paralegal, and it's like cha-ching, 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 cha-ching. And I'm just I was a witness. And so for Trump, he's going through 5 of these things. They're trying to bleed him dry. That's what is being lost in this. I mean, it's not just the lawlessness of it, the lawfare of it, as you point out. It's also like the idea is just to bleed you and to wear you down. To get someone to capitulate. But so I think that's part of this, is that they're literally, this is the idea, is just to go after them. And all of these things, starting with the Alvin Bragg case up in New York against Stormy Daniels, where I was asking people, I don't get this. It's beyond the statute of limitations. The bookkeeping charge is a misdemeanor. They're elevating it to a felony. Yeah. It doesn't make sense, but it's because it's Trump. They're just doing it, and no one cares because the media doesn't care because, well, we all know that they want Trump to get convicted. They don't like him. So they're willing to look a blind eye to all of these blatant attempts to disregard common sense law, the Constitution, statutes, law, like local laws, civil procedure laws, all this. But I want to get, if we can, because I know our time is short, to the immunity thing that you brought up. Now, I've talked to a bunch of lawyers. Let me just tell you again, as the non-lawyer, how I see this, and I need you to explain where I'm wrong or why it's different. So Trump's going to the appeals court, right? And that's where it is. It was this week initially for 3 judges, and making the case, as I understand it, that I'm immune from prosecution with respect to January 6th because I was acting in my capacity as president of the United States. And when you're acting in your capacity as president or whomever, whatever job it is, you need the ability to do your job. And he pointed out that, you wouldn't want, maybe you would, but you can't go after Joe Biden because of the failure and the death that resulted in the disastrous withdrawal of Afghanistan. You can't say 12 soldiers died. We're going to go after and convict him of murder, right? That's wrong. He was acting in his capacity as president. Okay, I get that. That was a presidential act that Biden did. It was disastrous, but you can't go after him the same way that you can't go after a police officer for a traffic stop and sue them saying you shouldn't have been stopped. Okay. But what I have heard a lot of lawyers say on television is Trump wasn't acting as president of the United States. He wasn't trying to be a fair-minded broker of the election and saying, hey guys, there are 2 candidates. They weren't treated fairly as president. I want to clear this up. He was acting as candidate Trump and trying to instruct his supporters to do something. So explain to me why I'm wrong or I'm right when it comes to immunity and why he should or should not be given it with respect to the January 6th actions.
So members of Congress, through the speech or debate clause of the Constitution, have both criminal and civil immunity for their official actions and the outer perimeter of their official actions under Supreme Court case law. So do federal judges under judicial immunity. Their official actions are the outer perimeter, civilly and criminally. The president right now has civil immunity, including the outer perimeter of his official actions, because no president has ever been charged with a crime until these 4 bogus indictments by Jack Smith and Fani Willis and Alvin Bragg brought these 4 indictments against Trump, right? So it has never been established whether the president of the United States is immune from criminal prosecution for his official actions or the outer perimeter, like members of Congress, like federal judges.
But if a member of Congress, and I've seen this before, a member of Congress, actually, we saw this just this year with, what's his face? Jamal Bowman, right? The member from New York, he pulls the fire alarm and he pleads guilty to a DC misdemeanor, I think it was, which was, falsely pulling a fire alarm. I've seen members of Congress charged with DWI. That's not in your official capacity. Even if you were at a fundraiser, you're still breaking a law, right? So where's that line?
That's a very good question, and that's the problem with what DC Obama Judge Tanya Chutkan, this radical judge, said presidents don't get criminal immunity, which is insane. That's just not right. Otherwise, the Trump 47 Justice Department can indict and prosecute President Obama for capital murder for ordering an extrajudicial drone strike on 2 American citizens, including a 16-year-old. And do we want to go down that path? And so what needs to happen is the DC
so just so I
Circuit—
understand this, what she's saying, if I'm hearing you right, what Chutkan is saying is there's no criminal prosecution. And if that's the case, okay.
Criminal immunity,
then you could go after a president like Biden after he leaves office for, as you mentioned, a drone strike or abdicating his responsibility at the southern border. Somebody could say, my child died of a fentanyl overdose that came in through the border. You're to blame because you didn't secure the border. Is that right?
Yes. You could charge Obama with capital murder for the drone strike. You can charge Biden with manslaughter or felony murder for a fentanyl overdose or for his disastrous withdrawal in Afghanistan, as you mentioned, that killed 12 American soldiers. We don't want to go down this path. And so the DC Circuit, it seems like they're not going to hold at a baseline level that the president of the United States, any president of the United States, is immune from criminal prosecution, right? So that will have to go to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court will have to take that case. They will have to put on their big boy pants. I know it's a Trump case and they want to just pull the blanket over their head and pretend like there's a monster in the room and, make that monster go away. But they're going to have to take this case because this is so much bigger than Donald Trump.
Don't you love it, Mike? You know what I love is when I'm hearing political analysis on the cable stations, right? And every time they talk about the any of these cases come to the Supreme Court, they go, John Roberts hates this. Da-da-da. I'm like, dude, you're the Supreme Court. This isn't like you're like, God, I just signed up for hall monitor and now I got to deal with all this big important stuff. When you get elevated to be Chief Justice or even just an Associate Justice of the Court, what did you think you were going to be deciding? It's the Supreme Court, not the kangaroo court. I get a kick out of these cable commentators like, man, they just really hate this stuff. I'm like, then don't do it.
Yeah, you have lifetime tenure, you have pay protection. You're not supposed to care about the politics, but as you and I know, Sean,
but my point is, on a broader level, don't you find? And I get it, it's not them whining; it's the pundits and the critics and the people.
They're whining too.
I know, but I'm just like, they're like, oh, Roberts hates when this happens, and I'm like, what cases did you think you were going to get? You don't get the easy ones. They don't. It's the Supreme Court. They're like, Your Honors, this is jaywalking. Mr. Davis is charged with crossing while the light was red. He argues that he couldn't see it. Could you please decide? Let's bring in Judge Wapner and Judge Judy to help. I mean, this is the Supreme Court, folks.
Yeah, and this will be one of the most consequential cases ever before the Supreme Court, because guess what? If the President of the United States has to fear that his successor is going to prosecute him criminally for what he does as the President of the United States, our country's done. The president's not going to be able to do his job. It becomes we become a third world Marxist hellhole. So the Supreme Court will have to establish at a baseline level that the President of the United States, even Trump, God forbid, is immune from criminal prosecution for his official acts.
Can't they say official acts and this wasn't an official act, right? They could say that.
What then happens is they remand it back to the D.C. District Court, Tanya Shutkin. They hold a mini trial on the immunity issues to figure out what's official and what's non-official, and then they go forward with that. Here's the issue. Here's the gist of the argument against Trump, that he was mad that he lost and he didn't order the D.C. National Guard quickly enough to go in. He didn't order the D.C. National Guard to go in quickly enough to put down the lawful protest on January 6th that devolved into a riot, right? So that's what they're saying. He didn't move quickly enough to put down the riot. Okay, well, that's not true. It was Nancy Pelosi and Muriel Bowser who said he couldn't have the National Guard ready to go because that would be an insurrection. But even if that were true, if Trump was too slow to send in the Guard, he can't do that as a private citizen. He can't do that as a presidential candidate. He can only do it. The commander-in-chief of the D.C. National Guard is the president of the United States. Unlike the states where the governor is the commander-in-chief of the National Guard, the president of the United States.
See, there you go.
DC
Boom.
National Guard.
That's it. So the act has to have been the only way he could have acted. But can't they say those people would have never been there if you as a candidate hadn't told them to come there to defend your candidacy?
It doesn't matter under the case law. You don't look at it subjectively. You don't look at it based upon their intent. You look at it categorically. Is this an action of the president or not? And calling the D.C. National Guard is squarely
there you go.
an action of the president.
Boom. This is why Mike Davis
Trump's going to win at the Supreme Court on these issues, and about 3/4 of Jack Smith's case is going to go away. And what's left, right? You're going to have the obstruction charge thrown out. And you're going to have a lot of the fact that Trump didn't call the D.C. Guard fast enough, which is nonsense.
See,
that's going to get thrown out.
Listen, I'm telling you, this is why you're so good at this, and this is why I hope people listen to the show. This is when people ask all the time, well, is Trump immune? Well, January 6th, just say to them, what did you want him to do? And they say, well, he should have called the National Guard and go, could anyone have called except for him? The answer is no, as you just pointed out. Therefore, it is a presidential act, right? Boom. And I think that we answer these questions to the opponents of Trump with simple rhetorical questions. Could he have stopped? Could he have done what you wanted him to do on January 6th? Without calling for the National Guard? No, he had to do that. Okay, who's the only one that can do it? The president. Oh, therefore it's a presidential act. Boom, you're wrong, right? I mean, that's how I think we win some of these things, is just by throwing the mere argument back in the face of the liberal leftist and the media types who don't want to look at the facts. I have two more quick things that I want to hit you with. The first one is, you mentioned earlier Fani Willis. Marjorie Taylor Greene fired a complaint Wednesday alleging that criminal misconduct by the district attorney prosecuting former Trump and his co-defendants. This all has to do, and then there's obviously this issue about the prosecutor getting hundreds of thousands of dollars because apparently he was in an affair with her. Break down what's going on in Georgia and how it might play out.
Cheers to Marjorie Taylor Greene for actually going on offense here, and her complaint, her criminal referral to Georgia Governor Brian Kemp and Georgia Attorney General Chris Carr is very, very serious. And the Democrats know it's serious because I've heard from liberal reporters who have said MTG has Fani Willis cornered like a rat because Fani Willis illegally hired her secret boyfriend. She used Fulton County funds to illegally give her boyfriend over $600,000 to go after Trump. Her boyfriend is so stupid. He has never tried a felony case, let alone
he's the Hunter Biden of lawyers.
Yeah, he's just
unqualified.
He's a total buffoon. So this buffoon DA hired her buffoon boyfriend. He billed $600,000, including 2 meetings with Biden White House staff, including the White House counsel, where they clearly talked about this Trump case because that's what he was hired to do. That's what he was billing Georgia taxpayers to do. And oh, by the way, this boyfriend took Fani on these elaborate, fancy trips to Napa and to the Caribbean, around the world, as a kickback. And so,
the funny thing is, Mike, I there's so many times I've been in politics 30 years. Actually, this year, this will be 30 years since my first race. And there are times when things happen. And I'll literally say, there's no way, like so-and-so can't be that stupid. There is no way that anybody would be dumb enough to fill in the blank. And this is one of those things where I'm like, you've got to be kidding me that you have a DA that hired a prosecutor to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars that wasn't A, qualified, and B, they were hooking up with, that there's clearly a paper trail for. That just, I look at that and go, no way, you can't possibly be that stupid.
They are that stupid. And guess what? These federal cases aren't going to get resolved before the election with presidential immunity.
Well,
and so Trump's going to win back the White House and get rid of those cases. The biggest problem for Trump was this Georgia case, because even though it's a bogus case, he can't make that go away. Well, Fani and her boyfriend just made that go away on their own.
Yeah, and that's actually, I'm glad you said that, because this is largely, and this gets back to the immunity thing, I think largely a beat the clock situation. Just run out the clock on all these cases, and then he gets back, in office and can deal with them. Before we go, I want to ask you, this was something that popped earlier in the week that I was just waiting to ask you because it blows my mind. Let me read it to you and everyone else. This is from Politico Playbook earlier this week. It has to do with the House's effort to impeach Alejandro Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security. It says, Constitution doesn't allow to impeach Mayorkas for policy disagreements. Top legal brains are calling foul. Yesterday, Republicans' go-to constitutional scholar on all things impeachment, Jonathan Turley, argued in a Daily Beast op-ed that there's no basis for a Mayorkas impeachment. Impeaching someone over policy difference, incompetence, or poor judgment, he writes, would be a slippery slope and go against the founders' wishes. This morning, and obviously this article's old, a bipartisan group of legal scholars, including George H.W. Bush alums Donald Ayer and Stuart Gerson, are warning against the efforts on similar grounds in a letter posted to Just Security. Quote, the Constitution forbids, according to them, impeachment based on policy disagreements between the House and executive branch, no matter how intense or high stakes those differences are. Real quick, because I only have like 30 seconds left. Impeachment is political. There's no rule of law here. If they want to impeach him because they think he's wearing a bad color shirt, they could do that, right?
It is political, but here's a bigger problem. Mayorkas has violated his oath. Right. He took an oath to enforce the laws, to uphold the Constitution, to enforce the laws. He has intentionally violated that oath. He has allowed, almost 10 million illegal economic migrants to flood into our country, unvetted, fighting-age men from third world bad countries. He's allowed fentanyl to flood into our country, and it's killed many Americans, right? He needs to be impeached for his dereliction of duty, for violating his oath.
That's where I think this is different, is that they're saying, we're not just saying we don't like your policies. We're saying and it's also, I mean, they point out incompetence, but I'd say he violated it. He's allowing things to happen, which is in violation of Congress's instructions in certain things. Mike Davis, we covered a lot of ground. God bless you for informing us and for making me smarter. This is great. And obviously everything that you guys do at the Article 3 Project is so helpful. You're a needed voice in this environment right now, because I listen to these numbnuts. You read about them, you hear them on these political panels, and it's through voices like you and what you guys do over there that we actually hear common sense and legal-based rationale for these things. So thank you for coming on again.
Thank you.
All right. For those of you who are watching,